Phantom Forces is a game that's 8 years old. It's one of the most iconic games on Roblox, but over the past 2 years, we see that, playership has gone down, the percentage of people that like the game has gone down, and just overall player sentiment is very low right now. It's probably not at its all-time low, but it could definitely be a lot higher. So yeah, I saw Strider's video a few days ago on this topic, and I just wanted to give my thoughts and opinions about like the future of Phantom Forces, but I decided to title it differently. I went with the survival of Phantom Forces because I don't think Phantom Forces is dying anytime soon. Actually, I think they have a good 5 years left or more, but the things I'm going to talk about in this video I think are really important to help push it as long as possible. And I also think these changes are important because, the player base is aging really quickly and we just aren't getting new players quick enough, which kind of explains the reason for the overall trend of the player base going down, in my opinion. So I just think the game itself needs to get a little bit better at attracting new players in order to keep the player base a little bit more steady. So I'm just going to share all my thoughts about what Phantom Forces can do to improve the game or make the game just more playable in general. And I just want to say, like, as a quick disclaimer, the devs are working hard to my knowledge. I mean, they're not perfect, of course, but I think they're putting in a really good effort to make this 8-year-old game keep moving forward. And a lot of that effort is kind of hard to see because what they're mostly doing is restructuring framework, which is kind of backstage stuff. But yeah, let me get into my points. So the first big topic is overall updating of the game. Now, I think it's no surprise that they should be a little bit more proactive rather than reactive and make sure whenever they're updating the game, it's bug proof and it's just fully ready before they actually push the update. So this is kind of a trend we've seen with Phantom Forces in the past where they push an update and it kind of breaks some side of the game and they have to like quickly fix it, and it's stressful for them. It doesn't make the experience better for players. So they just really need to be more cautious and aware when they're pushing updates. Like the update they pushed like a week ago just resulted in so many game bugs. And then also look at how they removed a bunch of conversions, but they didn't add the guns that they were meant to replace. So I think that's just a little sloppy. If you're going to remove a conversion just so that you can add a new gun for that conversion, you should at least add the gun first before removing the conversion. That way, like, you don't have any issues with that. And they really didn't think it through that much because there's no real way for them to actually transfer the kills that you got from the conversion to the new gun. So there's some issues there. One thing I do want to clarify from my video on this a couple days ago is that they will refund your credits though. So just don't worry, if they remove a conversion, they're going to refund your credits if you pre-bought it. Now, another thing regarding updates, I think they should really try to listen more to the community overall, doing polls and stuff to get suggestions for what kind of updates they could make. I think that would be really useful because the community is the player base and you want the player base to be happy. There should be a little bit more communication with the devs and the community on what direction the game should be going. Now, another thing they need to do is prioritize framework, which I'm pretty sure that they're doing right now. I gotta give it to them. Like, this is no easy task. The game is super old, so they're doing everything they can, I think. But the framework is really the thing that like it holds the game up, and it's been something in the past that has just restricted them from adding potentially good updates, but they just can't because the framework doesn't allow for it to. And then the last thing I will say about updates is that it just feels like the updates are coming out very slow. It seems like from what I can see, they're short-staffed. I feel like they could really benefit from an extra developer or two, and as we saw, the contractor had just resigned, so I don't really know like what Stylus's financial situation is, but I just think from like my perspective, it seems like they're just a little bit short-staffed, and I think it would be nice to have at least one more dev working on the game actively. All right, now I'm going to go into balancing because this is one of the biggest issues in Phantom Forces right now. So I just want to say that I'm not very knowledgeable about the game in terms of balancing. I would not be a very good person to ask about stuff like that, but I do kind of have some ideas as to how they can make the balancing a little bit better. So the main problem I feel like I'm seeing is that like they always need the balancer to also be able to code, and I just don't see why. I think what Phantom Forces could really benefit from would be kind of a committee of balancers, like a committee about people that are really knowledgeable about the game and would actually know in what direction the game should go in terms of balancing, rather than just having one person kind of do everything and then also code it. And I just think like balancing is such a hard thing to do by yourself that I feel like it would just make so much more sense if there were like 5 or 10 people that were all collaborating together to work on that, and then whoever is like able to code it would do that. It just seems like there needs to be more opinions coming together from people who are just actually knowledgeable about the game. Not saying that the balancers are not knowledgeable about the game. I'm just saying, the more minds you have, the better. And you just don't need to restrict yourself for having the balancers also know how to code. And just, I want to say that a more balanced game is just, it's going to make the game better as a whole, because if the game is not balanced and there's just a limited number of meta guns, then there's no real incentive to try new guns, and that's gonna happen no matter what. Like, you can't balance everything perfectly, especially with we have like 200 guns in Phantom Forces. It's kind of crazy, but the more balanced it is, the more like collective value the entire gun pool has, which kind of like, it makes the game better because you don't really need to add more guns to add variety to the game, because there's going to be more variety just by rebalancing stuff and making other guns that wouldn't be used more useful. So now I want to talk about the new content. So as I mentioned earlier, they really need to hire a new contractor, because without a contractor, without someone that can add the new content that's currently in the test place, I mean, we're just not going to get it, you know? It's just not going to come to the main game unless they just decide to push it for some reason being unfinished, and then we're going to have like remove conversions with no additional replacements, which I don't think they would do. I think that's just not going to come to the main game until they hire a new contractor, so that needs to kind of be a priority. Now, another thing about content is that we need new maps, okay? The maps in this game are like very bad. There's some good maps, but there's a lot of maps that are just horrible. For instance, we don't need 3 Mirages. We also don't need 3 Malls. I don't know if you noticed, but in the main game, there's 3 versions of Mall, and Mall is just not a good map. Like, no one likes those maps, except I think the OG is probably the most liked out of all of those, but we just do not need 3. They are such bad maps. However, I think the new map called Jarvit in the test place is very good. I actually kind of like it. I don't know about you, that's just my opinion, but I feel like the map plays pretty well. You know, this is probably going to get better and better because there's more people submitting new maps because of the incentive Stylus put out like a couple of weeks ago or like a month ago. So I'm glad they did that. I'm just really looking forward to having new good maps, and for them to also remove bad maps, because I mean, it gets so boring having to only play the same maps. I would like to be able to have like 10 or 12 maps that I actually enjoy playing. I think that would make the game like instantly way better. And then the final thing about new content is the guns in the game. Now, I think this is pretty generally agreed upon, but a lot of the guns are very similar, and we, you know, like, we just don't need that. Like, we don't need a new Colt Mars. I don't know like what you think, but we just don't need it. Why couldn't we have gotten some like fancy World War I gun or something like that instead? Just like, the guns need to be more unique. There's so many just similar guns in the game that it just gets like confusing for people. I don't know, there's just so much potential out there for like more interesting guns. You know, there's so many like different countries that we could pull guns from, and it's just, I don't know. I would just really appreciate that though. All right, so now I want to talk about like new features, because we haven't had a lot of new features in such a long time. Like, the game has stayed really steady in terms of that. The only new updates we get are like new maps and new guns, and like, that's it, and UI changes. So in terms of new features, something that I was kind of thinking of would be like, I don't know, fun ideas to add more incentive to play the game rather than just grinding for the next unlock, especially at a rank 300 level. I have no incentive to play this game other than like, I kind of just enjoy playing, but they could add like daily or weekly gun challenges, something like that. I think they talked about this before, but just never implemented anything. So as I was talking about earlier, you kind of want new players to want to stick with the game, and also you want your old players to keep playing the game as well. So adding just more incentives to playing the game rather than just saying, okay, you get a new gun next time you rank up, would probably help the game a lot, in my opinion. And I think this is also partly a framework limitation. Like, it's probably very difficult to add something like that, so I just want to put that out there. Another thing that we really need in Phantom Forces is special customization outside of just reticle color. Like, they let you change the color on your reticle, but I mean, that's cool, but it's not really like actual customization. Something that a lot of people have been interested lately are things like custom skyboxes, custom character arms, custom hit markers, custom reticles. I know you can't have users upload assets themselves, but if there was just like a couple choices to select from on your skybox, on your arms, on your reticles, stuff like that, that would be really nice. Like, that would just improve the quality of life and the overall player experience by a ton. So I would really like to see that. And then another thing is custom keybinds. I know, like, I personally probably wouldn't use them, but I know a lot of people have been asking for those. For the longest time, it's been 8 years and they still don't have custom keybinds. So if they get around to doing that, I think it would also help the game. All right, now final point is going to be long run major problems that will kind of like limit the game from surviving in the long run. First thing is hackers. So the problem of hacking has been steadily rising for the past like year or so, and they just really need to address that more directly. So recently, in the past like couple of weeks, there's been a lot of patched hacks, which is really great. So we have seen kind of a relative decline in hackers, but still the overall trend from the past like year or 2 years has just gone up so much. So if they could somehow make a better anti-cheat, I don't know what the limitations are with Roblox and with their framework and everything, everything, but I think a better anti-cheat would just really make the gun like more likely to last in the long run, because if you look at a game like Apocalypse Rising 1, that game died purely because of hackers. I think if there were no hackers in that game, even though they haven't updated it in like 5 years, people would still be playing that regularly. But because there's hackers, you know, it just, you just don't want to fall into that hole. So I think they just really need to do something about this, and I think they are doing something about this, which is good. I think they're working on the anti-cheat. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what they're doing. And then the last point I'm going to talk about is Core 6, or the new Core, the Call of Robloxia game that they're also developing. So they're not calling it Core 6, so just don't call it Core 6, but I'm going to call it Core 6. So I don't really want to talk about this too much because I'm not like a mind reader. I'm not a genie. I don't know what's going to happen. I just think instead of doing Core 6, they should have done Phantom Forces 2. I think that would have been a lot better. That would have made a lot more sense. But if they do finish the game, which they probably will, they've already worked on it for a long time, it's probably going to take a lot of Phantom Forces players and just move them to their new game. So I don't really see a way around that unless Core 6 just completely flops and people just prefer Phantom Forces. But even if Core 6 is successful and, you know, a lot of players do jump from Phantom Forces to Core 6, I think people are still going to play Phantom Forces. So I don't really think it's too much of an issue. It's just going to make it so that Phantom Forces can't, like, you know, just jump to 30k players or something. You know, that, I mean, that would never happen, but I think people are going to still play Phantom Forces after. But like I said, I'm not a genie. I don't know what's going to happen. That's mostly just your best guess, to be honest. But yeah, so that's going to be the end of my my opinions on this game. I probably missed a couple of things because there is a lot to talk about. So if you have something in your head that you think I missed, feel free to just put it as a comment and we can talk about it. I'll respond to comments and stuff like that. But yeah, I do want to hear your opinions about like where the game is right now and where do you think it's going to go, and just overall general opinions. So yeah, anyways, I'm just going to leave it there. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.